please.
Thank you, James, for the nice introduction.
You're welcome.
So I'll go ahead first. And so first of all, thank you for the invitation from me and on behalf of Dr. Kathleen Chua. I have attended some of the sessions yesterday and today. It's amazing what you have done. And we've had a kind of a group of amazing presenters from all over the globe. So congratulations to you for this wonderful conference.
You're welcome. This is a little
Glad
thing I
people are
could do,
enjoying.
really.
Okay, so in today's session, thank you very much for everybody who has joined us today. We hope that you will also enjoy our session too. So what we're going to do is I'll take around 20 minutes. I'm going to use my clock because I always go over. You know, as teachers, we love talking. So I want to make sure I don't use too much time so that Dr. Catherine can also finish her presentation. So we'll do my part first for 20 to 25 minutes, and Dr. Catherine will do her part for 20 to 25 minutes, and then we can have 10 minutes for questions and answers. Okay. So we'll engage with you during the session as well as like after we are done. So we'll try to do both. Should we wait for a couple of minutes, James, or go ahead? Is it time? It's time in
I
like
think
2 minutes.
Yeah, I think it's almost the time. You may go on if you'd like.
Sure. Okay. All right. Great. So my name is Kashif. As James introduced both of us, I am a lecturer in English at Qatar University, and I also serve on the faculty senate. And I'm a co-lead for one of the English courses that I teach. So in today's session, I'll be giving some of the examples that come from that course and how I have addressed the problems created by the pandemic in my classroom, and where do we go from here. So let's have a look. Basically, we are going to focus on what we have learned from the pandemic and what is the way forward. How can we proceed with our understanding of the challenges posed by the pandemic? The previous sessions also touched on those. So we're just going to add our view on it. So hopefully you'll be able to connect with previous sessions and the future challenges you're facing in this area. Some of the previous sessions I've had with other colleagues discussed some of these problems. For example, in one of the sessions we had earlier when the pandemic started, we talked about the role of language teachers, that before it was important, but it has become the most important now, because we are very important in the challenges created by the pandemic, because everything is going online. So the language through which we communicate with our students has become very important. And that's why we need to invest a lot on teacher education. And then we also talked about teaching and learning, that before we were using technology as an additional thing, but now it is a part of teaching and learning. So this may have an impact on employment and incoming student population. The students that are graduating, the students that are enrolling in our programs, they may also have to be aware of the expectations in terms of technology. We talked about innovation in teaching and learning, that the resources we have, are they flexible enough to be modified and used in the future and address the challenges that are created by the pandemic. We talked about curriculum and assessment in the past, that the curriculum that we are using, especially, for example, where I am right now, this was designed for on-campus teaching, but now we're using the same curriculum for online. So are our curriculums flexible enough to be adjusted in both modes of teaching? And finally, we talked about the role of textbooks, that the textbooks we're using, are they applicable in both modes of education, or are they not? And what are the changes they need to address? This is a session that I'm talking about. If you would like to watch the recording, I believe it's available on YouTube. If you just type the QU and Settle webinar, I'm sure you'll be able to find the video. Then we also had a session similar like to this in India, where I talked about micro-level challenges posed by the pandemic, and that's what I am going to discuss today as well. And Dr. Catherine will be talking about the research part. What does it have for the researchers to consider when they want to conduct research. So as a teacher, I will be talking about two main things. For example, the teaching strategies and materials I've used in my class to meet the SLOs and PLOs, as well as motivate, engage, and help my students learn the target language that we hope that they will learn from towards the end of the course. So the activities and strategies that I share worked really well in my classroom, and I believe if you give them a try, hopefully you will have similar results. So the strategies I'm going to share are basically based upon my own kind of endeavor as a researcher. So I believe that we have so much diversity in today's classrooms, and that's why students' expectations, students' needs are different within a classroom, within a culture, within a society. So that's why we need to address differentiated instruction, that there are different needs of different students, so we need to modify our instructional strategies to meet those students' needs. And those expectations or those alignment can be based upon cultural, linguistic, and educational backgrounds of students. So when we want to modify our instructional strategies, we need to keep these three factors in mind. And how can we do that? One way is to address learner differences. There are differences between learners or within a classroom. It could be from the same cultural group, but they may still have learning differences. And then culturally responsive curriculum as well, that the content we're bringing to the classroom, are students familiar with that culturally, or is it something completely different? So this is where we talk about content versus language. So are we focusing on content in our classrooms? Are we focusing on language in our classroom? And then third, linking learning to students' practical life, that the skills we're teaching, if we link them with their practical life, they feel more motivated and they work a little bit harder than in normal situations. And part of this was shared in the form of a publication that recently came out in a journal that published our work. So here we talked about what makes an effective TESOL teacher. We used a case study of Gulf, but this may have implications in other parts of the world. And we found out that our students expect our teachers to be not only compassionate, like developing a relationship with them, but also having an effective teaching methodology, teaching strategies, those teaching strategies which motivate them, they encourage them to learn. So if a teacher has a combination of those, students may find that teacher very effective. And then another finding I have published in the past, is that you can also develop a contract with your students. It could be a formal, it could be informal, like having a discussion, saying, okay, these are some of the challenges in our classroom. These are some of the possibilities we have. And these are different ways we can address these challenges. So let's work together. So instead of teacher being the main source of information, it's good to have students on board so that the decisions you make will be informed by not only your understanding, but also students' expectations and understanding. And that may have a good impact on their performance in the classroom. Now, the activities I am going to share today are basically informed by one of the paper I did in 2018. And that's where I presented or proposed a teaching adaptation model. That this model can be used in different contexts and different cultures to adapt teaching strategies. And the model has 5 strategies. I do not suggest that you must use all of them. I don't suggest a particular order. It's up to the teachers, whichever they want to pick and choose. They can employ them in their context, and they can develop their materials, develop their teaching strategies based upon those. The materials I'm going to share today are actually informed by the model. So we will have a look and see how that model can inform the construction of the materials as well as their implementation in the classroom and what results they're producing. So what I do is basically use this model in the form of a worksheet. I create it in the form of a table, and then I write down my strategies for every class. This is an ongoing process in every school, in every classroom or every semester. And every group of students may have different challenges. So I use, for example, this semester I'm teaching 3 courses, so I'm using 3 different sheets like these. And I keep notes for each separate section that, okay, this group of students has these challenges. and I can address them this way. The other group has these challenges, and I can address them that way. And that's how I kind of create some effective materials that are tailored towards student needs. So, for example, one thing I do in terms of collecting material from my students is learn about their languages. I also shared this when I gave a session in Pakistan on multilingual pedagogies to support local languages. So, for example, my students are mainly Arabic speaking, but they also speak English, and which is the target language. I speak English, Urdu, and Punjabi. So what we do in the beginning of the class, we learn about what languages they speak. Some of my students also learn Turkish. Some learn Spanish and French. So we look at different languages and see what languages we can use in the classroom to not only motivate, but also use first language resources to develop English language skills. So this happens in the beginning of the semester, and they feel motivated that whatever they learn and whatever they have learned previously is being used in the classroom. And then to teach them, for example, legal English, I use some of the vocabulary that I know from Urdu, coming from a legal background. My students bring their Arabic meanings, then we discuss them, negotiate them, and then we use them in our exercises and task completions. So when students feel like that their previous knowledge is being welcomed in the classroom, and they're also learning about different languages, for example, comparison of Urdu, and see how these words are similar. For example, in Arabic, a plaintiff is called al-muddai, and in Urdu, we call it muddai. So when they look at the similarities between languages, their multilingual and multicultural acceptance also increases. They become very tolerant towards different languages. So in addition to helping them learn the target language, we're also clarifying our values in terms of what languages are and how those languages can be supported. And then they use that language in chat boxes, they use that language to talk, they use that language when we have jokes. So they feel welcomed in the classroom that, okay, this is a environment where our professor is not like a jailer, a police officer who is kind of walking us through a specific path. This is like a dialogue discussion class, and we can all contribute in different ways. And then they give really positive feedback. This is an example of how they feel after the activities I use in the classroom. For example, you can see that they liked the activity, the vocabulary, the way they learn vocabulary through a combination of English and Arabic, and they feel more motivated. So now we are in an era where we are stuck with technology because we have no other option, unless we all want to go behind kind of a transparent glass and then we want to talk, which will also create some challenges. So I wanted to share some ideas of how I'm using technology in my classroom to do what I just showed you. So like I said in the beginning, we are in a stage where technology has become an integral part of language teaching or education in general. We cannot teach without technology. So we have to learn ways to integrate technology or teach through technology. But one of the challenges we face in our classroom is that not every student is tech savvy. Somehow we as teachers take that for granted, that our students will have some technical expertise. For example, I teach post-secondary students. These are adults, 18, 19 plus. So they use mobile phone all the time. But that does not mean they also know how to use Blackboard and other technologies. So when we build those expectations, we also need to be kind of considerate about students' challenges. And then in addition to technology, they're also learning a foreign language. And foreign language anxiety is a big area of research. So our students are not only struggling with the target language, they're also struggling with new types of technologies that teachers are using, as well as the anxiety that comes through a combination of all these things. So as teachers, we try to be aware of these as we create materials, we raise our expectations, or we develop our expectations. We need to keep in mind all of these things. So I'm going to give you an example of how I use technology to walk them through from very simple steps to more difficult steps, so that they feel supported and they feel like, okay, we are learning step by step, and we are being supported even though technology is creating challenges. So one of our tasks is to learn how to write a summary. And in a normal semester, what we would do is that we would introduce them to summary, and then we start practicing summary writing. But because of technology, I know their previous semesters were also online. So what I decided to do last semester and this semester is break that down into smaller activities. So we could do it over 2 sessions, 3 sessions, but at the end of the activity, they feel like, okay, now they understand how to write a summary. So we start from a very basic step, for example, paraphrase. And then we go to finding the main idea of a text, and then structure a summary, and then finally practice. And then they submit their work. So for paraphrasing, we go from word level to sentence level. And this is like the whiteboard of our blackboard. So students give me those sentences. So these are their sentences that they write. Sometimes they come up with very funny sentences as well. And we have fun. And then they paraphrase those sentences. These are like their work. And I'm just sitting down there being a facilitator, not giving any input until they're done with the activity, and then we talk and fix the sentences. After they're done, then I introduce them to summary writing. Okay, there are 4 steps of summary writing. Step 1, 2, 3, 4. And this is what we can do. So when I introduce the summary writing, they're already familiar with the parts of summary. For example, paraphrasing at word level, sentence level, and what does it mean to paraphrase. And then I also record videos for them. So in case they are not paying attention during the class, they can watch the recorded lesson or some additional videos that I have made. They do all of this, and then they practice at home. This is like one student who practiced. She or he found the main ideas from the textbook, created the activity, took photos, and posted them Blackboard. So after we pass the stage, then I provide them a guided activity where they use those guided starters of sentences. They write down the summary. When they write it, they post it, we talk about it, and then they move on to practicing at a summary level, writing the whole summary themselves. So what I'm trying to emphasize here is that technology is being used, but I'm not taking it for granted that they are familiar with technology and they can just master themselves in the use of technology. My target is to teach them English, not technology. So I'm trying to decrease their dependence on technology by trying to lower the effective filter and try to make my activities simpler. After they do this, we come up with a self-checklist. So they check their work against the checklist. Then they see whether they are meeting the requirements of the rubric or not. Then they fix it. So this is all the work students are doing, and I'm just watching, looking at them, encouraging them to do it. Then they submit it for my feedback. So you see, before they come to me, they have already done a lot of work themselves. So although they are using technology in some of the activities, but again, they're taking responsibility of their work. So once I have their work, I go online, I look at their work, and I give them feedback. For example, individually or as a group, we select some samples, we give them feedback, and these are being recorded. For example, this is from a law course where they wrote a description of a photo, and then I provided them feedback on language, grammar, correction, and then they fix it and post it again. Here, sometimes it could be very brief feedback, sometimes it could be detailed feedback. And so in addition to that, for example, we're learning listening skills. So because of the limitations of technology, students cannot listen during the class. So what I do is I introduce them to online resources like British Council. So they go and do the activities. And again, I am just monitoring their performance. To see whether they have done it or not, I ask them to take a photo and post it on the Blackboard. So I know they have completed the activity. Again, they become in charge of their learning instead of me teaching them or walking them through. These are adult students. So I have some expectations that they will take responsibility of their learning, and then they will develop it themselves. So I keep an eye on their performance by looking at the evidence they provide. Okay, so in the beginning of the presentation, I pointed out that I also use the local languages. And this is a big area especially after the introduction of multilingualism in TESOL, we hear a lot of people talking about use of local language resources in the classroom. And as part of that, I gave this session in Pakistan on 19th of February, where we talked about how we can support local language resources of students. And there's a recording available on YouTube if you want. After the session, I was contacted by a few teachers saying, we also do the same thing. We ask our students to translate the words from English to Arabic, English to Urdu, English to Turkish, and then they memorize them. So I got back to the person saying, that's not what I'm trying to propose. I'm not encouraging translation because that will kill the purpose of learning or translanguaging multilingualism. What I'm proposing is to take a critical approach to using English in TESOL. So translation and translanguaging, multilingualism are two different things. Yes, translation is part of it, but it should not be just translation. I don't want you to teach your students to just translate from English to Turkish, for example, and just memorize those words. That's not the purpose. The purpose is to do that translation, use it as a starting point, and then think in English. Think in the target language, whatever language you're teaching. So use both language resources to learn the target language. So first language becomes as a resource rather than a safe haven. I mean, in case you cannot produce a target language, I don't want my students to go back to their first language and start using it. I want them to use it as a starting point and then build upon that. As an example, so I thought I would share something that I do, for example, this semester. We're talking about multiculturalism. And I introduced multiculturalism. Qatar is a very multicultural country, so students are kind of aware of this. But there are students who are not aware of the term multiculturalism and what are advantages and disadvantages. So what we do is we translate those key terms, understand the concept, and then students think of some examples. For example, we looked at, okay, multiculturalism is, or cultural is thaqafa. And when we look at the plural of culturalism, it's thaqafa. So they look at, okay, this is multiculturalism. Let's look at Qatar. Then they come up with all these examples because they get that key word. They understand the key word in English and Arabic, and now they can think of different examples. So you see, this is like using translation, but as a starting point, and then moving on from there. So I'm not encouraging my students to depend on Arabic. I am encouraging them to use Arabic for understanding the key concept that they cannot understand in English. Use the resources and bring them to the classroom. Here's another activity, for example. We learn the meanings of different words or terms. So I introduce them the terms, and then I say you have 10 minutes to look at the words, look at the meanings of these words in English and Arabic. And then after you understand both meanings, we discuss them as a class. We negotiate the meanings in English and Arabic, both languages, so that they understand what it means in both languages. And there are students who disagree. For example, sometimes we come up with the meaning, and then there's other students says, teacher, this is completely wrong, because we don't say that in one country or the other country. So we also learn that there are so many differences within Arabic as well. It's not just one standard Arabic, because people, for example, in Qatar may use one word, people in Sudan or Egypt may use a different word. So we negotiate the meanings of words, and then they start thinking of some examples. For example, these are some examples created by my students. And when they are using these or creating these examples, they're not being corrected. They're being encouraged to write whatever comes to their mind. And then it's my job to correct them. And what I do is I use their created samples or sample sentences to create a practice quiz. And then I give that practice quiz before we have the exam. So you see, students are being responsible for their own learning. It's not the teacher giving a lecture. It's because we're online, we're not face to face. There's a kind of a wall between us, which is technology. So I want them to feel part of the classroom. This is some of the ways they feel that they are welcome in the classroom. Okay, so coming back to the end, because I think I'm 21 minutes. So all of these are examples of how I differentiate instruction in the classroom. I believe that there are differences not in terms of the Qatari students being different from Turkish students, Pakistani students, Spanish students, but also there are differences within the student population that I have in my class at Qatar University. So, which brings us to the cultural, linguistic, and educational background of students, and then deciding what instructional method is important for our students, and then using successful techniques, for example, addressing learner differences. So when they do those group tasks where they're providing feedback to each other in terms of translation or trying by themselves, they feel motivated and supported that, okay, the teacher is giving me the opportunity to try, and then he's correcting. We also develop culturally responsive curriculum or topics, for example, multiculturalism. So this is related to their culture, and then they get to clarify their understanding, their values as they're discussing it. And finally, linking it with students' practical life. For example, some of the tasks we do, for example, in summary writing, they may have to summarize when they graduate from university. They may have to talk to people who are multicultural in Qatar. So they are developing an understanding of the problems and challenges as well as the opportunities they will have when they kind of speak with multicultural, multilingual speakers in Qatar. So I'll end my session here. If you want to read more about it, you're more than welcome to access this paper. This is freely available, and you can download it and have a look. I'll pass on to Dr. Kathleen now and stop sharing my slide.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. I would require you to log in into this peer deck. Just let me share. You can see my screen. So could you just go to joypd.com and then just key in the code and you'll enter the classroom.
This is for all the participants?
Yeah, all participants, sorry, for everyone. Please join, get into this link, joypd.com, and then just key in this code and then you enter my classroom. Because it's kind of interactive, along the way, you will be encouraged to, key in some of the responses. So do you have problem entering the classroom? Oh, I have one person connected.
And that's me. James, do you want to try and see if we...
Yeah, I would.
Yeah, please try. It'll be fun because you will be asked to participate.
Yeah, sure. I would join, but I've got a little problem here. I'm doing screen recording, so that's why I prefer not to exit.
Okay, it's okay then, James. It's all right. You can watch.
Sorry.
Yeah, but the rest of you, please join in. Just go to joypd.com and then just key in the password and you enter the classroom. Going to start, so you don't need to see me. So I'm hoping that more of you will join. So what Kashif has shared with all of you is about university students, ESL learners at the university. So in general, university students face challenges as well when we transit to online. COVID-19 has a very huge impact in education. And personally, I feel that ESL learners will have same set of challenges and at the same time different types of challenges as well. So for university students, found that schoolwork was the most difficult, problem using and adapting to technology driven courses because they have to be in the PC the whole day, and sometimes students may not want to interact. I have classes where students who just simply very, very quiet. So what should I do, or what should we do as lecturers or teachers? And then I have also in classes that students are really very interactive and participative. Why I use this platform is also a way to show that how as lecturers we can engage the students even online using different platforms. So this is just one of the platforms which I learned actually from my students. So university students also feel difficulty in using video conferencing and how to interact online, because you do have Google Meet, we use Zoom. One thing I do not like about Zoom is when I share screen, I can't really see your faces, so I'm not too sure how you'll be responding. So yeah, students face that problem too. Of course, for ESL students, you have less opportunity to participate as actively, because unlike in class, you don't have a chance to talk as much. And therefore, ESL students feel that they have reduction in the opportunity to use English. And in many cases, teachers are not prepared, or properly trained to teach online. So many of the courses are still face-to-face. So for university teachers, these are the challenges that I believe that many of our colleagues have already mentioned. Relying on technology, sometimes we do have disruptions, and monitoring student participations. So today on my part, I'm going to talk about classes, which is K to 12. In some contexts, it would be primary school, secondary school, or in Canada, it's high school. I'm from Singapore, so we follow the British system a lot more. So the terms that I use could be more like primary school and secondary school, but it's equivalent to elementary, middle school, and high school. So in your screen, you will see that you are able to key in your comments. So I want you to type in, how has COVID-19 pandemic impacted your classes, your own classes? So I'm just going to give you a minute. So to start the screen, you can start keying your answers, and I actually can see your responses. So I'm waiting for responses. So Kashif, maybe you can take the lead, and the rest have joined the classroom. Just key in your answers. Try to open. Okay, you have six. I have six people in. So what about the rest? How has it impacted your class? I teach a lot online, but even then I find that I have a lot of Zoom meetings. So even teaching is now fully online. So what about the rest? Anyone else? Okay. So if not, I'm going to move on. So yes, for example, like I add in students not wanting to talk online. So that is the most challenging part for many lecturers. So today, like I said, I'm going to talk about students, classroom students, and not university students. So how has this whole COVID-19 impacted children? This is a very passionate topic for me because I have a son. He's 11 years old. So consecutively, you'll see examples of the things that he has been doing in class. Because in Calgary or in Alberta, parents have a choice to whether to head back to class after kind of like school closed last year in March. So it's about almost a term. And then in September, parents are given a choice whether to have the children back face-to-face, homeschooling or virtual classrooms. So I chose virtual classrooms for my kid. So hence you will see what are things that he has been doing. So impacts for ESL learners for K to 12. So for low income families, they found that they have very much less access to computers, internet connections. Even in Canada as well, especially if you live in more remote areas, connection is a huge problem. Even if you have the device, you may not have the internet connection. So this is a challenge. So ESL student needs a lot of social interaction, authentic social interaction, in order to improve their English or their language. And at the current time, it is not only about digital divides, whether people have internet connection or not, but it's the quality of technology-based teaching and learning. What kind of activities students are having online or in a virtual classroom, especially for ESL learners. So other impacts including ESL learners are found using computers for rote learning a lot more, learning vocabulary, learning sentences. And in virtual classroom, it's very difficult to create a very language-rich environment for the kids to participate a lot more. And of course, for older kids, the other challenge will be when students do not feel that the classes are helping them in any way in future, so that there will be an increase in dropout rates. So during and post. So as teachers, what should we prepare for post-pandemic? I really believe that it will be relatively soon that all children will return back to classroom. So this is just an example of my son's virtual classroom. I think it's very interesting. Honestly, as a lecturer, I'm very, very impressed by this teacher. He makes a lot of effort. So this is his online virtual classroom that my son sees every day. The first thing he logged in, I blocked out the link to the Google Meet classroom. So these are the homeworks that he will see. That is when it is due. So my son is in grade 6, and in grade 6 in Alberta, you do have provincial examination for grade 6 and grade 9, but because of COVID, grade 6 examination for last year and this year is on hold. So of course my son is very happy, right? Not having, provincial examination. So all children will have to go through this exam. So this is like what he sees in his virtual classroom. He has a logged in, and that is his daily log. This is just an example. Daily log means that he has to focus on 4 main areas: his math, his social studies, his science. LA stands for language arts, and every day there is something that this is what he needs to do on his own in addition to his homework, and this is compulsory. Every day he needs to read. So there is a lot of self-responsibility. So the kids can cheat, definitely, but there is a lot of trust and self-responsibility. So why I show this example, so my son is not an ESL student, but I can imagine how an ESL student will feel going to a virtual classroom that's predominantly in English. So for example, he has to do an IXL mathematics. So this is a program that the kids can use. So these are the different topics. So this is just a screenshot. So this is one of a kind of questions that he can click and he can choose. So as you can see, for those who are in my classroom, you can read the question and try to key in. You enter a number. So what do you think the answer should be? So yeah, I'm going to give you like 30 seconds. So you read quickly and you key in that. It's a math question. It's a word sum. So I want you to imagine, if you are an ESL student, if you have to do these mathematical questions, what are the challenges that you will have? So yeah, so I'm going to give you 30 seconds to read the questions and then tell me you can key in the numbers, and I will see. I bet this is Kashif. Because I trialed on him just to make sure that it works. Okay, so yeah, so anyone else want to try? Before I stop sharing this slide, anyone want to try? Okay, so yeah, the answer is 2. So that's what my kid needs to do. So this is quite fun. So English in science, right? So if you're an ESL student, this is one of the science work that he has to complete. But one thing for my son, I need to explain that he's not ESL, but his classroom doesn't have ESL students. So the teachers assume that they can do the work. So, but I just want you to picture that you are teaching a class, and these are the topics that the kids need to understand. So one of the science topics is, does air takes up space? So what the teachers require him to do over the weekends with me as a parent, that he has to do an experiment. He can make a choice, and then I have to record him performing the experiment and then upload it, and then he has to key in the answers. So I want you to picture not only as an ESL student, but as an ESL parent, so that you need to do that. Okay, so the children need to understand and the parents need to understand too. Right. Next, this is one of the topics that he has done too. So it's about learning of the topics on space. So you talk about planets. So what the teachers require him to do is to identify the 6 planets, and each planet they have to find information on internet and then process the information. Finding information is one thing, reading it, process to understand, and he has to write it. So it looks great because he has gone through many drafts with me as a mom, right? So he has to do this. So this is one thing about him. So I have to teach my kid how a postcard should look like, what he needs to include, and how he should present his information. So this is English and science. So before that, we have science as well, and then mathematics. So this is what he did yesterday. It was such a I said, you need to screenshot this. I need to show in my presentation tomorrow. And this is interesting. He's learning about hypothesis. And so what it means to be, to do an experiment, what it means to be variables, and what is, I'm not gonna ask you to key in information for this slide, so I'm running out of time. So he has to answer, like make a choice. Which one explained what is independent variables and dependent variables. So this is science hypothesis. So again, I want you to picture if you're an ESL student and you are an ESL, come from ESL family. Okay, so again, this is very fun. What the teacher did, the teacher is pretty IT savvy. So I'm not too sure whether you know this game. This is a hot game that my kid is playing with many of his friends. It's called Among Us. Please don't ask me. I have no clue what this game about, but apparently it's really fun. So what happened is this teacher has an informal dialogue with the kids and ask them what they like, and apparently many kids like the game Among Us. So what happens is the teacher used the same platform Among Us and to create a science quiz. So it is so fun. My son was totally excited. He said, this is the coolest teacher he ever has. So this is social work. So we talk about a virtual classroom and what the kids can do. So this is social studies. So I blank out the name. So there are actually breakout rooms for different, there are 28 kids in the class. So the teacher create breakout rooms. And each room there are 4 to 5 kids, and these 4 to 5 kids have to work together on one worksheet, and they have to do this online. And the teacher is actually monitoring. So they have to share information within that 45 minutes with the teacher. And of course, offline, the children have to communicate in a small group to fulfill this assignment because it's graded as a group. So now the most important one is language, as I'm going to speak through really quickly. So in the English, these are usually the things that children have to do. So my son has to do comprehension and summary. So it's quite a pretty long passage. I need to screenshot a little bit. So he has to read and then to summarize in 2 or 3 points what this passage talks about. He struggles initially because he doesn't really know how to summarize. So which means that mom had to sit next to him and show him how he could do it. Then you have grammar. It's an online platform for the kids as well. And for example, he has to identify the verb. So he has to click and highlight which is a verb. So this is quite a good platform too that my sons use. So this is interesting. So this is called simple writing. So what the teacher did was to give them a picture, and then they have to write what do you think, what's the plot is for non-fiction, fiction, what's the character. So this is called simple writing. And this is to write a report based on a novel. So he has to read the novel with the teacher in class, and of course on his own. And then he has to do this. I'm sure everyone is quite familiar with the sandwich model, right? So introduction and so on. And then he has to do it in a good copy. This is his good copy. But again, I need to justify he did this many rounds with me. And many times, at the initial phase, I taught him how to integrate codes because he needs to find evidence from the books to justify why he's saying certain things. So again, I actually wanted you but I want you to think about what are possible challenges to write this paragraph if you're an ESL student. All right. So again, online learning has a lot of advantages. In this one is, for example, Kashif showed that the university students have to know what the assignments they have done. Same thing for a grade 6 kid. These are the assignments that he has to do, and then these are the things that I could see as a parent at the end, whether he has done it, the grades that he has received, and I do check it at almost every week. On weekends I'll check, or on some days when I have time. So assuming you're ESL students, even if you're familiar with technology, what are some of the struggles that you will face to perform this task in a classroom and in a virtual classroom? So these are the thoughts that I want you to think about. And then as a researcher, assuming that the students are already familiar with technology, right? Assuming, what are challenges they will face, whether our assumptions are correct, whether, like what Kashif said, knowing how to use the phone, knowing how to play games, does that mean that really knowing how to engage with teaching and learning using the different learning platforms online to study? What are the areas in terms of research that we can do for ESL students? What kind of information that we can collect, and why this is important? Teaching in the COVID times, like I said, there are many, many challenges. One of which, a main one, is family support. Because when I help my son with the assignment, I mean thinking, what about kids who do not have the family support like he has with me? And of course, the mental well-being, Zoom online fatigue. I don't know whether, I believe some of you have children. I never see my son has Zoom fatigue. Anytime that he has to be online playing with his friends, he's super happy. And what are the challenges, but what are the opportunities at the same time? Like I show you this platform using Peer Deck. I think it's quite interesting if you can explore this platform, because the children actually can key in information and answers on the spot. They can see it in visual. I think that they will be very excited. How, as educators, we can reinvent education, greater innovation in teaching and learning. I think this teacher is very innovative. A lot of independent learning. There's also opportunities. My son has learned to check his own assignments, make sure he has done everything, because he has to send his report to me. But after a while, he seems to know what he needs to do. Okay, so what are questions for future, how to improve? So these are different research areas that I think we can explore. Pre-service teacher training. What are the systemic structures that we need in school? What are some of the micro school level policies that we can have to support ESL students to actually, when they come back to face-to-face teaching, if not even right now in virtual learning? What kind of data can we collect? As we know, data for both quantitative and qualitative, there are many, many different ways that you can find information or collect information to see. Why do I say that? Because I think it's very contextual too. So if, for example, if you are in a school which has predominantly 70% of students who are ESL or migrant students, then the kind of approach that you will take will be very, very different. The kind of data that you can collect will also be different. So yeah, for my kid, his school doesn't have any ESL friends, so that will be a different kind of challenges that they will face. So it's very contextual. So at this part, I'm going to stop, but I'm going to just show the last slide. Why it is important that we have to do research in these areas, because ESL students and migrant students will face greater challenges, whether they're virtual learning or whether they're going back to classroom. And for low-income students and even English learning students, some of them are not even showing up online in virtual classrooms. How do I know? Because I hear all the stories from my own students who are teachers, the kind of struggles they are facing, even teaching online. Like, for example, kids are not showing up. Even they're showing up, they're not handling homework for the last 6 months. So these are the challenges that they will encounter. Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to stop. So we're going to have conversation. I'm going to stop sharing. Oops. Okay. Okay, that's done. So let's have a conversation.
Yep. If there are any questions, please let us
Yep.
know. Or anything you would like to add.
Yes, I have a question, please.
Sure.
First of all, thank you for the nice session. It was really very fruitful session. Like one of the things I noted is that how we can develop motivation in online teaching, like having a little experience of 2 semesters. I have noted that out of 53 students, in my class, only 20 or 18 students like attend the class. So how we can motivate them while teaching them on?
So I'll go ahead, Dr. Catherine, if that's fine.
No, I just want to ask how old are the students first, so I can start thinking.
Yeah, they are undergraduate students. They are the BS second semester or third semester students.
Okay, Kashif, you can go ahead.
Sure. So I think I get to ask that question a lot here, even as teachers. I mean, we talk about it that, okay, so how can we encourage them to be in class and participate? So if you remember what I did for some of the tasks is that I asked them to do those simple tasks and then they move on to the difficult tasks. And then I asked them to provide the evidence. For example, if they do the listening exercises, they take a photo and then they upload it on the Blackboard. So I know who is working on what. And yeah, it can happen that sometime one person can finish the activity and he can share the task with someone else. But I tell them in the beginning of the semester or beginning of the activity that you are responsible for your education at this time. If you don't take it seriously, you're going to have a lot of problems. I'm here to support you. If you don't take it seriously, then you are not going to pass the task, you're not going to pass the exam, and that's how you're not going to learn. So let's take it as an opportunity where I facilitate the learning process and then you develop from there. So I make them in charge of their education. And the second thing, if you have paid, if you see that we create a contract, me and my students. So for example, what we do is we say, okay, so what about those students who come late? What are we going to do with them? Those who come in the last 5 minutes when I'm taking attendance. Those who are there but they never submit homework. They come up with suggestions and then I use those suggestions to create rules. So what we're doing here is we're using peer pressure to create the rules of the classroom. And then those who don't abide by the rules, we punish them. And sometimes that works. I mean, again, it works with my group of students most of the time, but it may have different results in your context. So give it a try and see if you could use the peer pressure, keep a track of their record, and then if they're not participating, they're not contributing, probably talk to them, have a conversation in class. I remember having those conversations at least 10 times throughout the semester, like showing my frustration. What is wrong with you? Why are you not talking? Why are you not contributing? And then they come back, like our children at home. We have to have those conversations and then hopefully they come back. Catherine, you want to add something?
Yeah, I'm going to jump in. That's a very, very good question. Okay, I'm going to use my son's example and then my personal example. I think in my presentation, I show one part is Among Us. So when my son went online virtual learning, I actually sat close to him and try to observe, right? And it was really a struggle initially. So there is a lot of time spent on the teacher to establish a relationship. And therefore, for example, like I showed, the teacher used the game Among Us, and the children were crazy. So imagine to interact and engage with a bunch of grade 5 and grade 6 kids, basically 10 or 11, for 1 whole hour is really very difficult, really very difficult. And it was very fun. He has this thing called, to create, like, instead of Wheel of Fortune, he has Wheel of Luck. And he put in a lot of music to make it very exciting. So every kid every day has a chance to have a Wheel of Luck. So which means that they have certain incentive. For example, they can organize a game, they share a joke, like my son got it, share a video, a 5 minutes video. So these are the things perhaps will get the students, if you're younger students, to be really excited to go to class. Now for me, I teach postgraduate students. So that is also another challenge because they're basically all working and they're all teachers, they all die in school, especially in this period of time. So what I did was I made my project very related to the work. So for example, my first assignment is think of like the question I asked you, how COVID has impacted your school. So identify maybe 2 or 3 areas and you write a 1,000 essays for me to see. It's probably confidential. And I can tell that they are very excited, and the feedback they told me is that I couldn't believe that the assignment is actually related to what I'm doing. So what I connect for the first assignment to my last assignment, which means it's a much bigger assignment. You identify an area of concern, a challenge in school, if you are a school leader, whether you're principal, you're a teacher lead, or you're head of departments, or even in your own areas, how could you respond to that challenge? What are some of the things that you could use? What are some of those resources that you have in your school? So of course, along the way, they have to present for me. It's a group project. I have it on Tuesday, little presentation, and all the articles that I source will support them in doing the assignments. What I found out, because that it is so related to their current situation, they are able to feel that whatever the work they're doing is going to be constructive to their work. And I told them at the end, when you hit back, that at the end of course, I want you to try it out in your school and then come back and tell me what happens. I did that for pre-COVID too, for other projects, and they came back and told me what they actually did in the school and whether it works or it doesn't work. So I try to make my assignments now very related to the struggles that they have. So I hope I have answered your question. So I feel that personally they are very, very motivated. This is the review that I have, informal responses that they send to me, that they find it very motivating to do things that they find will benefit in their work.
Thank you.
I think we have one more question, asking how as teachers we can make sure students are aware of new attitudes, new changes, and reflective attitudes, and how can I apply self-regulated writing tasks such as summarizing and concept map to achieve interactive feedback in online academic university levels via TIC's mixed method collection assessment. So I think she's basically asking about how can we create an environment where students kind of get used to the new attitudes of learning.
Do you want to go ahead or?
Sure, go ahead. No, I'll wait for you.
I think for this is my view, right? I think all students, they know, regardless of age, that they know this is a new way forward. But of course, in the initial phase, I definitely agree that all students will struggle regardless of age. I see how my kid struggled initially too. Like, he doesn't know where to look for his assignments, how to interact with teachers. But one thing I noticed is the teachers take a lot of effort to be online with the kids during the school hours, that when the kids send the questions, he responds very quickly. And that's how I feel that the children learn over the time the expectations. For adults, I think for me, I created a separate platform, Padlet. It's nothing to do with the expectation of the assignments. It's just a platform for them to key in the struggles that they have every week, and I read and I respond. It's a whole class thing. So I often tell them we are all in this, and I tell my students, even my postgraduate students, that I too have my own challenges, and I'm not saying that as instructors I'm coping this perfectly fine. So so my students feel like they can relate to me, partly because I'm also telling them I also have challenges just like them. So we are going through this process together. And of course, as a mother, and I also share the challenges I have as a mom at home with a kid 24/7 for the last 12 months, and the challenges I have. So I think feeling students able to see that the instructors or the teachers are also real. I think that's is important. I tell my students too, I'm single mom, inverted commas, because my husband is still in Singapore. Because of COVID, he comes. So the last time I see my husband was like 1 year plus before. And understanding that, that the instructors are also human beings, are also having challenges in this COVID, I think the students were able to see and feel more connected. That's how I feel. I hope I answer your question, Ezra. Okay, Kashif.
Just wanted to add something to that I think if you create a link between the things you're introducing and how those build upon each other to complete a task, that can sometimes make them feel that, okay, everything we're doing in this class is important. For example, I showed you an example of doing step by step. So one of the steps is that they go and watch a video. So I'm going to post that video I made for my students. What they do is they go watch the video, they make notes. Then they come to the class and we look at those notes in the class. Those who haven't watched the video, so they get scolded. They get kind of, I ask them questions, have you watched the video, have you done the homework? And then they say, I have not. So then you kind of tell them, okay, if you're not watching the video, you're not able to do the task. Then the next time they come, hopefully they watch the video. So the video they watch, they take notes, they come to the classroom, they share their notes, and then we develop upon that, and then they go and do the next task, they come to class. So the classroom is becoming as a kind of a space where we connect different threads, but that's not where we're doing most of the activities. Activities are done outside of the classroom. We're just discussing the activities and resources I've provided them. So I think in terms of summary writing, that's how I teach them, or in writing. They do most of the task or work outside the classroom. They come to class and get some feedback. But again, you're going to get students who will never do that, and they are going to pay for it. I mean, in my understanding, if they don't participate, they have to pay one way or the other.
Yeah.
So we got like 3 more minutes.
Yeah, it's really not easy. I can always tell you it's really not easy. Even this peer deck thing, someone asked me for the site you share. It's actually basically peer deck. Oh, this is also very funny. You can find it on Google Slides. If you have a Gmail account, you can go to Google Slides, and in Google Slides you can find add-on, and in add-on you just look for peer deck and you can do that. It's quite easy. And the funny thing is, I also learned a lot from my son. He taught me too. He said, Mom, don't worry, I'll sort it out for you. And I test the slides with him too. So I'm saying that, there are a lot of opportunities that, yes, peerdeck.com. So there are lots of opportunities that you can also learn with the kids. But I definitely engaging the students is a huge challenge, even for me. Like via Zoom meetings, it's like sometimes you don't see human beings. But can you imagine, like, for children, it's also difficult. Again, I'm going to bring you back to ESL learners. What kind of challenge they do have in virtual classroom? Because the teacher assumes that, they can use it. No, not really. But of course, it is true that children do learn faster in terms of technology. My son figured out Zoom really fast. Say, Mom, there's new things. He could change my background. He can do this. Yes, they are indeed better. And how, as educators, we can utilize this to our benefits. I think that. But I want you to look at all the examples I've shown you to think of what kind of challenges the ESL students will face. It's really tough homework. Even as a mom, I look at it, oh my God, you have to do that. You need to know what's hypothesis. So of course the teachers will teach them, but a lot of responsibilities also fall onto the parents if the children are learning at home. So you want you to think about about kids who do not have the support at home. This is something I keep thinking about. What happens if they do not have support at home like you? I keep telling my kid, like you, then what will happen? Yeah.